Hello and welcome to a little 5-card draw video in which I will run through a couple of hands that took place a short while ago. Before I start, I'll just show the graph of 5-card draw sit and goes that I've played since 2010, which basically just shows that I do know what I'm talking about. I'm not just some person who is an amateur just trying to give advice when I don't really know anything. So yeah, sort of 8,500 games played and $11,500 profit. Okay, let's get into the hand. So this one I get dealt 2 pair, 7s and 8s. It's a standard open raise really from this point, to the same size as I always do. I don't adjust the size of my opening bets based on what hand I've got, because I mean you can try and tailor your bet sizes in some situations, particularly in multi-table tournaments, because you're not facing the same players over and over and over again. So if you're playing against total strangers, it's hard for them. It will take them a while to pick up any sort of read on what you're doing with different bet sizes. So you can do it a little bit, but I prefer to do it after the draw rather than before the draw, because I'll be making sort of bets after the draw far less frequently than I'll be opening pots. And what that means is my opponents will see far less of those situations arise, so it will take them a lot longer to get a read on what different bet sizes that I'm making actually mean. But yeah, the opening bet size, I keep that completely the same. One opponent goes 3, another opponent goes 1. They both check, and at this point I go fairly big. What I'm basically looking at here is, if this person hits something like 3 of a kind, they probably checked in order to shove over the top of a raise, so I'm getting all their chips. If they hit 2 pair and they checked, they're probably checking to call, unless I've got a very weak 2 pair. But I think they can very easily have 2 pair as well, so this bet size is tailor-made to try and extract value from 2 pairs mostly. So yeah, I mean, I think if I go sort of full pot or 5,000 or more, some mid to low 2 pairs are probably just going to fold, because it's a multi-way pot. I'm against 2 players, which lowers the chances that I'm going to be bluffing. They open from first position to act, which means it's very unlikely I'm going to be trying to steal the blinds. More likely I've got a genuine value hand here. So with those factors at play, it just looks like I've got a real hand rather than ever having a bluff. Which means that if they've got a mid to low 2 pair, and they know some of what they're doing in terms of strategy, they should be folding those mid to low 2 pairs. So I bet an amount that's a little bit more enticing, that could get calls from 2 pairs. And at this point, a player folds, another player calls, and it turns out they had the ace-high flush. Now this is a classic example of players will look at a situation, they might make the wrong decision, but because it turned out right, they'll then keep doing it thinking it's the right decision. And essentially what he's done here is made a very big mistake. And you might say, well, of course he hasn't, because he's called your bet rather than re-raising it, and he saved himself chips. Well, he has in this hand, but if he does that over 10, 20 or 100 times, he'll be losing lots of chips. Because when I open here, for the very reasons I said before, I've got hands like 2 pairs and 3 of a kind that I'm drawing 1 with to disguise them. Those sort of hands are very much in the focal point of my range. And that means that if he pushes the rest of his chips in, it's only going to be costing me 4,000 more into a pot that would then be 14,000. So I'd be getting sort of 3.5 to 1 pot odds. Which means if I think my hand is good sort of 23, 24% of the time, that's the mathematics of it, then I should call. When I've got a range like 2 pairs and 3 of a kind, I'm not going to like getting re-raised, particularly as he drew 1 card, but I'm probably going to have to call. So he should always be raising flushes for value. And even in the instance of maybe I'm opening raising with a flush draw, and then I'm betting having hit my flush draw, his ace-high flush is always going to beat a made straight or a made flush of 9, unless I've got exactly ace-king flush. So, all the draws that I might open with and end up connecting and completing a draw like a straight or a flush, he's beating most of those, and I'm always calling his raise with those as well. So there's so many reasons for him to push his last 4,100 chips in, and he will profit over the long run by doing that. The fact that he just checked and then called is a bad mistake, even though in this particular weird instance it turns out to be correct just because I hit one of 4 cards in the deck that completed a full house. But it's very rare that will be the case. Just so happened to be the case this hand. But yeah, we'll move on. There's another interesting hand further up. So the 3 of a kind hand, and yeah, that's the one. So here, we're in the big blind, and I get dealt a pair of 7s. The button limps in, and the small blind completes. I'm probably not ahead here. I mean, I could have raised to try and force them both out of the pot, but it's a slightly risky play, because every once in a while players might have something very strong in late position here and might just think, I don't want to raise and force the blinds to fold. I don't want to scare everybody out of the pot, so I'll just limp. And, that's not going to be the case most of the time. But, they might have a flush draw or a straight draw as well and miss, in which case my 7s might end up being the best hand. So there's a few reasons for me to lean towards not raising here, but a raise would be fine. I wouldn't say that's particularly bad, but yeah, I just decided to check. So I draw 2, this player draws 3, and Centurion on the button draws 1. So when he draws 1, I mean, obviously those very strong hands that are trying to disguise themselves are still there in his range, but it's most likely he has something like a straight draw or a flush draw, and he's just limping in to try and complete his hand. Which, by the way, is a bad play in itself, because if we go back a little way, I should have probably done this right at the start of the hand, but yeah, basically there's 2,200 in the pot, and he puts 800 in. So if there was 2,400 in the pot would be laying 3 to 1. His chance of completing a flush are 4.2 to 1. So the odds are too long for it to be a profitable call by him limping in there. So he's losing money by just matching the 800. I mean, if there was 4,000 in the pot, I mean, then he'd be getting 5 to 1 pot odds on a hand that completes at odds of 4.2 to 1 against. That would be profitable. But with 2,200 in the pot, it's not. He should either open for a raise and use his hand as a semi-bluff to try and steal the pot, or he should just fold. So yeah, I go 2, complete 3 7s. So this player went 3, and now I lead out quite strongly, and he shoves all in. I mean, it's slightly on the close side. There's some sort of reasonably okay players who'd probably say that I'm completely insane for folding here. But the fact is, for him to complete the 400, he probably wouldn't do it with a pair of 2s or 3s. It's a little bit too low. He might do, but normally it's going to be pairs from the middle range upwards when he draws 3. But sometimes it might have 3s, 4s, 5s, or 6s. But the important point to remember here is that when he checks, I bet sort of 2/3 pot, then he shoves all in, he's never bluffing. Just, it makes no sense for him to be bluffing. On the one hand, I drew 2 cards, which always puts the doubts in the back of people's mind that I might have 3 of a kind in the first place, that I'm playing slowly. And when it's checked to me and I bet, I can easily have improved to 3 of a kind. I've certainly probably improved to some sort of value hand, whether 2 pair or 3 of a kind. Which means that even if he's made a hand like 2 pair, he probably won't raise, which is what he's done here. The only hands he will realistically raise with are hands that have improved to 3 of a kind. And when he knows that 3 of a kind is already in my range, it's part of the possible hands I can have, in order for him to raise rather than call, you'd probably say he's more likely to have strong 3 of a kinds because he raised. Because he knows if I have 2 pair or 3 of a kind, I'm always calling when he shoves all in. So if he did it with 3 2s, he's probably getting called by 3 of a kind that are better. I'm probably folding those 2 pairs, so it doesn't really work for value if he shoves all in here with hands like 3 2s or 3 3s. It's bad for him to shove probably, because he only ever gets action from a better hand than his. And any bet that only gets matched by better hands, it doesn't really force many stronger hands to fold either, is a bet that loses you lots of money. So with all these things in mind, I decided to fold 3 7s, and people will probably call me crazy for that, but I guarantee you more than 80% of the time, maybe even more than 90% of the time, he will have 3 of a kind, and I would say in the times that he has 3 of a kind, almost all of the time, well, we'll say like 80-90% of the time there as well, he's probably got better than 3 7. I mean, it was a limped pot, and he did only have to match 400 more, but most players will be folding a pair of 2s, a pair of 3s there. I'm just getting out of the way. So yeah, I fold 3 7s, and I'm pretty confident it's correct. It was about 7,000 more into a pot of 16,000, so I was getting, say, slightly better than 2 to 1 pot odds, which means if I think I have the best hand 30% of the time or more, I should call. Maybe sort of 28% of the time or more, I should call. But I honestly believe entirely that I have the best hand less often than that. Probably have the best hand, I think, about 15% of the time, just off the top of my head. But, so there we go. I hope you found that video instructive.